For as long as he's been making music, Kendrick Lamar has been trying to open minds. But Kendrick Lamar is not a role model. On his third studio album, To Pimp a Butterfly, Kendrick became something of a liberal champion. But the truth is that just like the rest of us, Kendrick is a deeply flawed individual who's been trying to tell us that the entire time. I mean, sure, he's a Pulitzer Prize winner, sold more than 17 million albums worldwide, been nominated for 33 Grammys, won 13. I mean, his music is even archived at the library at Harvard University, and he's been described as one of the most thought-provoking poets of hip-hop, an innovative storyteller whose work has been compared to that of classic novelists like Joyce and James Baldwin. But here's the thing, since becoming one of the biggest names in all of rap music with the release of Damn in 2017, Kendrick Lamar has been going through something. Maybe a lot of things, and for anybody who knows anything about his past, it's entirely understandable. I mean, after all, you don't just get over being shot at or watching your friends die as a child. Now, with his return from a nearly 4-year-long hiatus and the release of his 5th studio album, Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers, Kendrick has seemingly finally accepted that he can't solve all of the world's problems. I mean, hell, he may not even be able to solve his own. You ever wanted to hear the full story behind Kendrick Lamar? Then stay tuned to this extra special episode of Before They Were Famous, in which we go in depth in regards to every aspect of his life and career. Kendrick Lamar was born in Compton on June 17, 1987 to Paula Oliver and Kenny Duckworth. His mother decided to name him Kendrick due to her love for singer-songwriter Eddie Kendricks of The Temptations. Lamar's parents had moved from Chicago to Compton in 1984 in the hopes of escaping Chi-Town's notorious gang culture. At the time, Kenny was running with a South Side street gang called the Gangster Disciples. So Paula gave him an ultimatum that Kendrick would one day relay to Rolling Stone. She said, "I can't fuck with you if you ain't trying to better yourself. We can't be in these streets forever." So these two shoved some clothes into a black garbage bag and hopped on the train to California with only $500 in their pocket. Their original plan was to head for San Bernardino, but Kendrick's aunt Tina lived in Compton, so they wound up there instead. Upon their arrival, Tina hooked them up with a hotel room and Paula got a job working at McDonald's. For those first few years, Kendrick's parents would move around a lot, from motel rooms to sleeping in their car and occasionally even a park bench if it was nice enough. But eventually they managed to save up enough money and rent their first apartment. That's when they finally had Kendrick. Lamar would grow up in a little blue 3-bedroom house located at 1612 137th Street, otherwise known as Section 8 housing, not far from Louisiana Fried Chicken, where he'd often go and buy himself a 3-piece meal with fries and a lemonade. During the first 7 years of his life, Kendrick was an only child, and his parents found him to be so precious that they nicknamed him Man Man. But eventually Kendrick would finally welcome some siblings, including 2 little brothers and 1 younger sister. For the most part, his family survived on welfare and food stamps as Paula cut her hair at $20 a pop and Kenny worked at KFC. Things may have appeared simple on the surface, but they were never easy. For instance, one of Kendrick's favorite spots to hang out as a youth was at Tam's restaurant. But at the age of only 8 years old, it would become the very place that he watched a man get murdered. At the time, Kendrick was standing across the street watching a dude over at the drive-thru when suddenly a guy ran up with a gun, popped the customer twice, killing him instantly. And get this, that was the second murder that Kendrick ever witnessed. The first was when he was 5 years old and watched from his window as a teenage drug dealer got gunned down. Reflecting on this moment, Kendrick would tell Rolling Stone, "After that, you just get numb to it." Well, you may get numb, but that doesn't exactly stop it from happening. Throughout the rest of his childhood, Kendrick would have to work his way through a whole bunch of atrocities like his uncle Tony getting shot in the head at a burger stand, or a couple of other uncles winding up in prison for 15-year stretches on robbery charges. He'd also be shot at as a kid, and according to his own lyrics, shoot someone himself at the age of 16. When asked by Vanity Fair to expand upon this story, Kendrick would only tell them, "I'll put it this way, I've seen my own blood shed, and I've been the cause of other people shedding their blood as well." It's a pretty harrowing account of something that most children shouldn't have to go through. I mean, you can almost hear in that quote that he didn't enjoy having to do that. And it tends to be something that a lot of rappers glorify, so I don't know. After hearing that 5th album of Kendrick's, this is very full circle, and makes sense that he thinks something like that. More recently, Kendrick has also dropped hints that he has repressed memories that may involve him having been sexually assaulted as a child. And while he doesn't come right out and say it, on the 2022 song, Mother I Sober, he subtly hints towards what happened with lyrics like, "Heal myself, secrets that I hid," buried in these words. And even though his parents had moved from Chicago to Compton so his dad could escape the gang culture, it didn't exactly last. And neither did his dad's job at KFC. At some point in his childhood, Kendrick began to get wise to his dad's work schedule and realized that his father was back to making money on the streets. something that to this day they've never really spoken about. I didn't know this about Kendrick. This makes his music crazy. Speaking of gang members, some of Kendrick's closest childhood friends were associates of Westside Pyrus, a local blood affiliate, while his uncles were largely card-carrying members of the Compton Crips. If you don't know what the conflict is between those two, I don't even know how you made it this far in this video. Taking into consideration how much violence he grew up around, it's pretty remarkable that as a child, Kendrick clued into the simple fact that nothing really changes unless you change yourself. But that's not something that comes easy. As a student, Kendrick attended McNair Elementary and later the Vanguard Learning Center, where he had a host of difficulties. Not only was he a little bit of a loner, he had a wicked stutter and he was also afraid of failure. He once told LA Weekly, "There was a math question that I knew the answer to, but I was so scared to say it. Then this little chick said the answer and it was the right answer. My answer. That bothers me still to this day, being scared of failure." That's kind of a crazy character arc to think about, that we got albums like Good Kid, Mad City and To Pimp a Butterfly just because some girl answered the question before Kendrick could. That's wild, you know? Despite his challenges, Kendrick was still a good student. In fact, come his tenure at Centennial High School in Compton, California, Kendrick had become a straight-A student who enjoyed writing first stories, then poems, and then he started writing, yeah, you know the rest. Now, before he had become a lyrical maestro, he was doing normal kid stuff like riding bikes, backflips off of friends' roofs, and sneaking into the living room whenever his parents would throw a house party. But the most important moment of his life would transpire at the age of 8 when he got to watch firsthand as Tupac and Dr. Dre shot the music video to California Love. From that point forward, Kendrick Lamar knew exactly what he wanted to do in his life. Kendrick started freestyling for the very first time at the age of 8, and back when he was mostly rapping about drugs. At the time, his parents had no idea what he was doing. Kenny would tell Rolling Stone, "We used to wonder what he was doing with all that paper. I thought he was doing homework, I didn't know that he was writing lyrics." By the time he was 16, Kendrick was rapping under the name of K-Dot because his closest friends always called him Dot. That's where he began to get serious about music, and he issued his very first mixtape, The Hub City Threat, Minor of the Year. He was recording in his friend's Dave Free's garage, who managed to get some of Kendrick's songs to Anthony Top Dog Tiffith, who was in the midst of breaking into the music business. When Kendrick stepped into the booth to perform for Anthony for the first time, the man was blown away by how good the kid already was. He told Vanity Fair, "What impressed me was how advanced Kendrick was at 16 years old. He spoke from an adult perspective every time he touched the mic." Anthony would sign Kendrick to Top Dog Entertainment, and over the next few years, Kendrick would continue to record and release more mixtapes under the name of K-Dot, with titles like Training Day and C4. Now that last mixtape dropped in 2009, the same year that Kendrick became a part of Black Hippie, a group whose members would include fellow TD artists like Ab Soul, J-Rock, and Schoolboy Q, all of whom would frequently appear on one another's projects. Eventually, Anthony gave Kendrick some solid advice. Drop the moniker and just go by your given name. The first project to ever bear the name Kendrick Lamar proper was his self-titled mixtape, which he dropped in December of 2009, and he'd quickly follow that up with Overly Dedicated in 2010. As Kendrick's first commercial release, Overly Dedicated would become his first ever to enter the Billboard R&B and hip-hop charts. Then in 2011, XXL would honor him with a selection in their freshman class. Having approached the threshold of the mainstream, Kendrick finally dropped his first official studio album, Section 80. The project would cross over into the Billboard 200 and peak at the 113th spot. At this point, a whole bunch of different people were beginning to take notice of Kendrick Lamar's rise. Paul Rosenberg, Eminem's manager and the chairman of Def Jam Recordings, brought Kendrick's music to Dr. Dre, who quickly signed Lamar to his Aftermath label in a joint deal with TDE. Then during a concert in late 2011, Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg, and The Game would go so as far to dub him the new king of the West Coast. And man, that is a heritage moment for anybody from the West Coast. Truly a classic moment. This set the stage for Kendrick's rise to the top with the first of his universally acclaimed projects, 2012's Good Kid, Mad City. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm not even sure if it's fair to call this album an album. It kind of seems like a movie. It's like a motion picture event, and you can see every single thing as it's being wrapped. I don't know, this is one of my favorite albums, so you know. I don't even know if it's gonna make it into the video, but man, love that album. The album dropped in October and entered the Billboard 200 at number 2 with a bullet. 3 of his project singles, Swimming Pools, Poetic Justice, and Don't Kill My Vibe, would reach the top 10 of the Billboard's Hot R&B and Hip Hop charts. Most importantly, this album showcased Lamar's talent as a storyteller. He'd be rewarded for his effort by being nominated for 6 Grammy Awards that year, including Best New Artist, Album of the Year, and Best Rap Album. But he wouldn't win any of them. At least not yet. Rather than rest on those laurels, Kendrick went on tour with the likes of Tame Impala, YG, and SZA. Then in September of 2014, he dropped I, which eventually would be included in his follow-up album to Pimp a Butterfly. Not only would this track become Kendrick's 4th top 10 single, but it would lead to his first Grammy win for Best Rap Performance and Best Rap Song. Soon afterwards, in early 2015, the Pimp a Butterfly would release and cement Kendrick's position as the most promising rapper in the game, with its placement on numerous best of lists. It would also go on to win the Grammy for Best Rap Album, while its single These Walls would rack up another handful of Grammy wins as well. What's more, the immensely popular single Alright would be adopted by the Black Lives Matter activist movement that sprang to life around the same time. Riding at an all-time high, Kendrick wouldn't wait long to release a demo album known as Untitled Unmastered, consisting of unreleased tracks that he'd recorded over the past 3 years. Much like to Pimp a Butterfly, it would debut at number 1 on the Billboard 200. And just like that, Kendrick had reached the top of the mountain. But what happened next would turn him into arguably the greatest rapper alive. Don't believe me? Well then why not take it straight from the man himself? During a pre-drop trailer on his single The Heart Part 4, where he absolutely demolishes Big Sean, but we're not going to talk about that, Kendrick Lamar would confidently declare on the track, "I am the greatest rapper alive." 3 months later, he'd relay a similar sentiment while appearing on Real 92.3 when asked if he considered himself to be the greatest. He replied, "I got to." He'd reiterate this belief for the 3rd time during an interview with Rolling Stone and then back up everything he said by unleashing his 3rd studio album, the monumental epic, Damn. Led by Humble, Kendrick's very first #1 pop music hit, Damn debuted at the top of the charts, like nearly every single chart. Even more remarkably, all 14 of its songs entered the Hot 100. I mean seriously, the entire damn album, pun intended, and within 3 months it was certified platinum. In the eyes of many, Kendrick was now unrivaled in terms of being the greatest MC in the world. At the Grammys that year, he'd snag 5 more statues, including Best Rap Album. How it didn't win Album of the Year, but instead got beat out by Bruno Mars' 24K Magic is quite honestly a tragedy, but one that was somewhat rectified in 2018 when Damn was honored with the Pulitzer Prize. This was also the very first time that judges of this immensely prestigious award ever handed it out to a composition outside of the classical or jazz genres. That same year, Kendrick would team up with the folks over at Marvel to spearhead the soundtrack to their hit film, Black Panther. And months later, Kendrick would be winning his 13th-time Grammy for the single King's Dead. But after the reception of Damn, something began to change. The savior complex that he had seemingly embraced on To Pimp a Butterfly began to melt away. Then Kendrick Lamar just disappeared. Literally, and not for a few months either, but for 4 freaking years. Listen to almost any of Kendrick's songs and you'll quickly notice how often the subject of survivor's guilt is brought up or hinted towards. It's definitely a reoccurring theme in his work and one that he expanded upon with Vanity Fair by telling them, "I had these 3 or 4 years of success and celebrity, but I can't get rid of the 20 years of being with my homies and knowing what they went through. I can't throw that away. I had to sit back and analyze it and figure out other ways I could impact these people without physically trying to bring the whole hood inside a hotel." As Kendrick wrestled with his own success and what that meant to him exactly, and those closest to him, he began to shroud himself in mystery. Over the next few years, he would occasionally pop up for a one-off appearance, only to then just vanish again. What's more, the years came and went without any hint of him working on a new album. Instead of new music, Kendrick decided to work on his family, something he once described to Vanity Fair as the ultimate connection with words to man. In 2019, he and his longtime sweetheart, Whitney Alford, had their first daughter. 2 years later, Kendrick would once again re-emerge with a note to his fans telling them that he was going off-grid on purpose and going on long stretches without his phone. On a statement to his website, Kendrick would write, "Love, loss, and grief have disturbed my comfort zone, but the glimmers of God speak through my music and family. While the world around me evolves, I reflect on what matters the most." With so many questions left unanswered, people began to question his sincerity. Was Kendrick Lamar really everything that he thought he was? The man that once wrote songs like XXX and Alright, heralded by activists of all types, was now saying things like this when asked to discuss politics by Variety. "I just get too frustrated." But then in 2022, Kendrick would reinsert himself into the mainstream. The only problem, not everybody was happy on how he decided to do it. Having spent the better part of 4 years shunning the limelight with only minimal sightings in things like the Star series Power, produced by 50 Cent, and some collaborative tracks with his cousin Baby Keem, Kendrick would reestablish himself in the year of 2022. First, in February of that year, he'd perform alongside Dr. Dre, Eminem, Snoop Dogg, 50 Cent, Anderson .Paak, and Mary J. Blige at the halftime show for the Super Bowl. 2 months later, he'd announce his newest studio album, Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers, was finally on its way, and he'd first released a music video for the non-album track, The Heart Part 5, in early May of that year. Considering that this was the first Kendrick single in years, nobody really knew what to expect. But when they saw the video that contained controversial deepfake technology, morphing Kendrick's face into those among others like O.J. Simpson, Kanye West, Will Smith, and Jussie Smollett, it quickly became apparent that Kendrick was here to make one thing crystal clear. He's really everything we thought he was. His disdain for where mainstream culture had headed since he stepped away would further manifest itself with tracks like Worldwide Steppers and Savior, where he drops bars like, "Bite they tongues in rap lyrics, scared to be crucified about a song, but they won't admit it. Politically correct is how you keep an opinion. Is tight-lipped. Who dare to be different." While Kendrick has never been shy about revealing details about his life, on his new project he also wrestles with a ton of his own personal demons, being more forthright with his own weaknesses than perhaps he ever has done before by speaking on topics like infidelity, daddy issues, attending therapy, and wrestling with childhood trauma like aforementioned sexual abuse. All of this comes to a peak with the track Crown, where Lamar seemingly concludes that people will never accept him, and that trying to chase validation will only result in the continued downward spiral that he found himself in. The very next song on the album, Silent Hill, boasts a collaboration with Kodak Black, a controversial rapper with a complicated past, including a 2016 assault of a teenage girl. As if only to illustrate from that point forward, Kendrick Lamar isn't about pleasing everybody. Kodak's appearance on this album itself is a commentary on cancel culture, not too dissimilar what Kanye West did recently by injecting Marilyn Manson and DaBaby into Jail Part 2. And yet, the one moment that may have really landed Kendrick in some hot water, and already has a ton of people calling for his head, is the track Auntie Diaries, in which he drops an endless barrage of slurs and plays fast and loose with pronouns while telling a story of moving from misunderstanding to acceptance and love for two transgender relatives. But like I said off top, you can't approach this album in the same way that you approached anything Kendrick has made before. By all appearances, this is the project where Kendrick has finally decided to shout from the mountaintop, "I am not your savior." I mean, quite literally. As he evolves into whatever he becomes next, Kendrick has done so by tearing down everything else that came before. That includes ending his nearly 2-decade relationship with Top Dog Entertainment as he moves on to a new label that he co-founded himself called PG Lang. And whether his listeners agree or disagree with this new version of Kendrick or his decisions, I don't think it matters all that much to him. He understands that his words now have power, and no one wields that power more ferociously than Kendrick Lamar. And as for where he goes next, well, that's the exciting part, isn't it? And besides, you know the deal, it's also a story for another time and another place, because this has been Before They Were Famous. If you've made it this far, I really appreciate you. My name is Clyde Smith. Please be sure to like and subscribe and ring that bell for notifications, and I'll see you guys in another video.